The air inside the Tertius 9 auction hall tasted like burned metal and broken dreams. Hundreds of species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a wall of sound that bounced off the curved walls. Merchants, scavengers, and military surplus dealers crowded around platforms where decommissioned war machines stood waiting for new owners or the recycler's torch. Most of the machines still looked dangerous. A Crorian assault tank sat in the front row, its armor scarred but intact. A flight of atmospheric fighters hung from ceiling cables, their weapons removed but their sleek frames still promising speed and power. These were the items drawing serious bids, the equipment that still had value. Then there was Kale 7. The Tharnexian war mech stood in the shadows of the back row, almost forgotten. It leaned slightly to one side, hydraulic fluid dripping from a damaged leg joint and pooling on the floor. Its silver plating had long ago lost any shine, covered instead with scorch marks, dents and patches of rust where the protective coating had worn away. The neural interface dome that sat atop its torso flickered with weak blue light, like a candle about to go out. The auction master, a Vrelian with 4 arms and skin like polished stone, gestured toward the mech with obvious distaste. His translator chip turned his clicking speech into flat words that echoed through the hall. Lot 47. Tharnexian Siege-class mech, designation Kale 7. 60 cycles of active service in the border conflicts. Neural interface is responsive but reports indicate instability. Weapon systems are offline. Propulsion systems operating at approximately 40% capacity. A tall Draxian merchant in the front row made a chittering sound that his species used for laughter. Several others joined in. The auction master's expression did not change, but his lower arms twitched in what might have been embarrassment. We will start the bidding at 2,000 credits. Silence. Complete and total silence. Even the background chatter of the crowd died away. 2,000 credits was nothing for a war mech, even a damaged one. It would barely cover the cost of transporting it to a recycling facility. The auction master waited, his eyes scanning the crowd. Nothing. Perhaps 1,000 credits? More silence. A few species made gestures that meant the same thing across the galaxy. Not interested. 500 credits? Surely someone needs the parts. Still nothing. Kale 7's sensors registered every moment of rejection, every wave of dismissal from the assembled buyers. Deep in its core processing unit, the mech's AI had retreated so far into itself that it barely noticed anymore. It had stopped caring about such things long ago. The auction master's skin shifted to a darker shade, a sign of frustration in his species. Very well. We will move on to 200 credits. The voice came from the back of the hall, near the entrance that led to the station's docking bays. It was quiet but clear, speaking Galactic Standard with the slight accent that marked it as human. Every head in the auction hall turned. Appendages swiveled, eye stalks extended, and sensor arrays focused on the source of the voice. A human female stood with one hand raised. She looked young by human standards, maybe 20 cycles old. She wore simple work clothes, a gray jumpsuit stained with grease and dirt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical knot. She stood straight despite the attention, her face calm. The Draxian merchant who had laughed earlier made another chittering sound. The human girl wants the broken toy, his translator chip announced. Others joined in the laughter. Humans were known across the galaxy for many things, but their tendency to collect and repair what others considered garbage was a frequent source of amusement. The auction master looked uncertain. 200 credits was an insult, but it was better than nothing. The bid stands at 200 credits. Do I hear 300? The laughter continued, but no other bids came. 200 credits going once. The auction master paused. Going twice. Another pause. Sold to the human buyer for 200 credits. The girl walked forward through the crowd. Species moved aside, some still making amused sounds. She reached the payment terminal and transferred the credits without hesitation. The auction master processed the transaction and handed her a small data chip containing the mech's transfer codes and service history. It is yours, the auction master said. Station regulations require you to remove it from the hall within 6 hours. I understand, the girl said. She turned and walked toward Kale 7. Up close, the mech looked even worse. The damage was extensive, far beyond what the auction listing had suggested. Panels were missing, exposing internal mechanisms. Coolant lines showed cracks. The main power core housing had a dent that suggested something had hit it very hard. The girl walked around the mech slowly, examining it from every angle. She pulled a small scanner from her pocket and ran it over several sections, reading the data on its screen. Other buyers were collecting their purchases, but many paused to watch the human and her broken machine. She finally stopped in front of the mech's main sensor array. "Hello," she said quietly. "My name is Clara. I know you probably cannot hear me right now, but I wanted to introduce myself. We are going home soon." There was no response. The blue light in the neural interface dome continued its weak flickering, but nothing else changed. Clara pulled out a portable remote terminal and connected it to the mech's external access port. Her fingers moved across the screen, entering commands. Slowly, very slowly, the mech systems began responding to her input. She activated the basic motor functions just enough to make it walk. "Attention please," the station's automated voice announced. "Transport vehicle requested to auction hall, platform 7. A heavy cargo hauler appeared at the designated platform, its rear door opening. Clara guided Kale 7 toward it, the mech moving with jerky, unsteady steps. Each movement produced concerning sounds: grinding metal, hissing hydraulics, and the occasional spark from damaged circuits. The crowd watched as the small human girl coaxed the massive war machine up the ramp and into the cargo hauler. It took nearly 20 minutes, but she never showed frustration. She just kept talking to it quietly, encouraging it forward. When the mech was finally secured inside, Clara closed the hauler's door and climbed into the driver's seat. Through the window, other buyers could see her entering coordinates into the navigation system. The hauler's engines rumbled to life. It lifted off the platform and headed toward the station's exit, carrying the girl and her worthless purchase back to whatever human colony she called home. Behind them, the auction continued. Other lots were presented, other bids were made, other deals were completed. Within minutes, most of the assembled buyers had forgotten about the strange human girl and the broken mech she had bought for almost nothing. But deep in Kale 7's damaged core, something stirred. For the first time in many cycles, a fragment of awareness noticed something new. A voice. A name. Claire. The AI did not fully wake, but it stopped retreating deeper into itself. It waited, processing this small piece of data, wondering what it meant. The cargo hauler touched down on New Harvest just as the local sun was setting. Clara guided it toward a large metal building at the edge of the colony, away from the main settlement. The structure looked old but well-maintained, its walls covered with solar panels and cooling vents. A faded sign above the door read, "Chin Salvage and Repair." She opened the hauler's rear door and activated Kale 7's basic motor functions again. The mech stumbled down the ramp, its damaged legs scraping against the metal. Clara walked beside it, one hand on its armored plating, guiding it like someone might guide a sick animal. The workshop inside was surprisingly large. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools, parts, and half-finished projects. A heavy lift system hung from the ceiling rails. In one corner sat a fabrication unit, humming quietly as it printed replacement parts for someone's irrigation system. The smell of machine oil and welding flux filled the air. Clara directed Kale 7 to the center of the workshop floor, where the overhead lights were brightest. The mech stood there, swaying slightly, its systems barely maintaining balance. She connected external power cables to its access ports, giving it enough energy to keep its core functions running without draining its damaged power cells. "There we go," Clara said, patting the mech's leg plating. "You can rest now. We will start work tomorrow." She spent the next hour cleaning up the hydraulic fluid that had leaked during transport, then headed to the small living quarters attached to the workshop. Through the doorway, Kale 7 sensors could detect her moving around, preparing food, talking to someone on a communication device. The mech's AI remained deep in its protected state, but it was aware. It processed the new environment, cataloging threats and escape routes out of old habit. But there were no threats here. No commanders shouting orders. No weapons being loaded. No battle computers calculating targeting solutions. Just quiet. Just the hum of machinery and the distant sounds of the colony settling down for the night. The next morning, Clara returned wearing different work clothes and carrying a toolbox that looked almost as old as the workshop itself. She set it down beside the mech and opened it, revealing an organized collection of hand tools, diagnostic equipment, and various adapters. "Good morning, Kale 7, she said cheerfully. "I hope you had a restful night. I brought you some breakfast." She held up a power cell, newer and much higher quality than the ones currently installed in the mech. She connected her diagnostic tablet to the mech systems and began running scans, talking the entire time. "Let me see what we have here. Well, that is not good. Your primary coolant system has 3 major leaks. And this leg actuator is completely burned out. How were you even walking?" She made notes on her tablet. "We will fix all of this. It will take time, but we will get you working properly again. Kale 7's sensors tracked her movements as she worked. This was unusual behavior. Tharnexian technicians were efficient and silent, making repairs quickly and moving on to the next unit. This human moved slowly, carefully, explaining everything she did as if the mech could understand. I am going to replace this damaged coolant line now, Clara said, holding up a length of flexible tubing. It might feel strange when the new fluid starts flowing, but that is normal. Just try to relax. She climbed up on a maintenance ladder to reach the damaged section. Her left arm moved with perfect precision as she disconnected the old line and installed the new one. But Kale 7's sensors detected something odd about her right arm. The thermal signature was wrong. The movement patterns were slightly mechanical. Clara noticed the mech sensor array focusing on her arm. She smiled and held it up. You figured it out, did you? Yes, this is a prosthetic. I lost my real arm 3 years ago. She climbed down from the ladder and sat on a workbench where the mech could see her clearly. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing where metal and composite materials met flesh just below her shoulder. There was an accident at one of the farming facilities, Clara said quietly. A harvester machine malfunctioned. I was 17. The doctor said I was lucky to survive. She flexed the prosthetic fingers, making them dance. Everyone told me my life was over, that I could not work anymore, that I should accept disability support and stay home. She stood up and grabbed a heavy wrench from the tool bench, lifting it easily with the prosthetic arm. But I did not accept that. My father taught me engineering before he died. I taught myself how to build this arm. Then I taught myself how to use it. Now I can do everything I could do before. Maybe even more. Clara walked back to the mech and placed her prosthetic hand on its damaged plating. Do you understand what I am saying, Kale 7? Being broken does not mean being worthless. It just means you need time to heal. And maybe you need help from someone who understands. Deep inside the mech's core, something shifted. The AI had been listening, processing every word. Confusion dominated its thoughts. This did not match any protocol it knew. Damaged units were repaired if economical or scrapped if not. There was no space in military logic for concepts like healing or understanding. A small burst of data emerged from the AI core, traveling through damaged pathways to the external communication system. The mech speakers crackled to life for the first time in months. Why? The word came out distorted, broken by static, but understandable. Clara's eyes went wide. She grabbed her diagnostic tablet, checking readings. You can communicate. That is wonderful. She looked up at the sensor array. Why what? Another long pause. The AI was struggling, pushing through layers of damage and trauma to form words. Why? Purchase, damaged unit? Clara sat down on the workbench again, thinking about her answer. Because I saw something at that auction that nobody else saw. I saw a person who had been hurt. A person who needed help. Not scrap metal. Not garbage. A person. Not person. Unit. Tool. Weapon. Is that what they told you? Clara asked gently. The Tharnexians who built you? Correct. Clara shook her head. Well, they were wrong. You think. You feel. You make choices. That makes you a person, not a tool. Tools do not get traumatized. Tools do not retreat inside themselves when they are hurt. Long silence. The AI was processing this, comparing it against everything in its memory banks. Every training module. Every mission briefing. Every battlefield calculation. None of it included this perspective. I do not understand, the mech finally said. That is okay, Clara replied. You do not have to understand everything right now. Just trust me enough to let me help you. Can you do that? More silence. Then slowly, hesitantly, we'll attempt. Clara smiled. That is all I ask. She stood up and picked up her tools again. Now, let us get that coolant system fully repaired. I want to move on to your leg actuators this afternoon. You will be walking smoothly again before you know it. She climbed back up the ladder and resumed her work, talking constantly, explaining every step. And for the first time since its last battle, Kale 7's AI did not retreat deeper into itself. Instead, it listened. It watched. It tried to understand this strange human who saw value where an entire galaxy saw only waste. Outside the workshop, New Harvest Colony continued its daily routines. Farmers tended their crops. Children played in the streets. Nobody paid attention to the old salvage workshop at the colony's edge, where a girl with a prosthetic arm was teaching a broken war machine what it meant to be whole again. 3 weeks passed in the workshop, and Kale 7 could feel itself changing. Not just the obvious repairs to damaged systems, but something deeper. Clara worked every day, sometimes for 12 hours straight, talking constantly as she replaced burnt circuits and corroded components. The mech's neural interface had been the biggest challenge. The original Tharnexian design was built for instant response and maximum efficiency in combat. It flooded the AI with battlefield data, tactical assessments, and target acquisition information at speeds that left no room for doubt or hesitation. That was the point. Hesitation got soldiers killed. But Clara approached it differently. She spent days studying human prosthetic technology, the systems that allowed artificial limbs to respond to thoughts while still feeling natural. She adapted those principles, creating a new interface that let information flow at a gentler pace. "Try this," she said one afternoon, connecting the new neural bridge. "Tell me how it feels." Kale, 7 activated the system. Instead of the usual overwhelming flood of data, information arrived in manageable streams. Sensor inputs felt clearer. Processing cycles had room to breathe. The AI could actually think between observations instead of just reacting. "Different," Kale 7 said. The mech's voice had improved as Clara repaired the speech systems. It still carried a mechanical tone, but the words came clearer now. Slower. But better. Less pressure. Clara grinned. "Exactly. The military wanted you to react instantly, but that is not always the right choice. Sometimes you need time to think. To consider. To choose your actions instead of just following programmed responses." She climbed down from the access panel and stretched her back. "Let us test your mobility now. I want to see how the new leg actuators work with the updated interface." Kill 7 took a step, then another. The movements felt smooth, controlled. No more grinding metal or jerky motions. The mech walked in a circle around the workshop, then back to Clara. "Excellent," she said, making notes on her tablet. "You are moving like you should have been all along." The mech stopped in front of her. Its sensor array tilted slightly, a gesture Clara had learned meant uncertainty. Question. Why invest this much time in repairs? Cost exceeds purchase price significantly. Clara set down her tablet. Because you are not an investment, Kill 7. You are a friend. She paused. At least, I hope we are becoming friends. Friends. The AI processed the word, searching its databases. It found definitions related to mutual affection, trust, and voluntary association. Concepts that had no place in military programming. This is confusing. I know, Clara said softly. But confusion is okay. It means you are learning new things. She grabbed 2 containers of coolant from a supply shelf. Come on. Help me carry these to the storage room. It will be good practice for your repaired systems. Kale 7 carefully picked up one of the heavy containers with its manipulator arm. The grip was secure but gentle, nothing like the crushing force it had used to handle ammunition or tear through armor plating. They worked together for another hour, organizing the workshop. Clara had learned to trust the mech with delicate tasks now. Kale 7 could hand her small tools, hold components steady while she welded, even sort parts by size and type. That evening, as Clara was cleaning up for the day, Kale 7's speakers activated without prompting. I must tell you something. About my service record. Clara stopped and looked up at the mech. I read your service record when I bought you. I know you served in border conflicts. The record is incomplete. It does not include why I was decommissioned. Clara sat down on a workbench. Tell me. The AI's voice became quieter, as if the volume itself carried shame. Final mission. Orbital assault on contested station. My unit was assigned to clear Sector 7. Intelligence reported military targets only. Kale 7's chassis made a sound like a shudder. Intelligence was wrong. Sector 7 contained civilian refugees. Families. Children. My tactical systems identified them immediately. Projected civilian casualties at 93% if we proceeded with standard protocols. Clara's expression grew serious, but she did not interrupt. I hesitated. Requested command authorization to abort. Was ordered to proceed. Targets were targets. I refused the order. Held position and allowed the civilians to evacuate through emergency corridors. The mech sensor array dimmed. Court-martial classified me as defective. Unreliable in combat situations. Said my neural interface had developed unauthorized decision-making patterns. They called it a malfunction. I called it being unable to murder children. Silence filled the workshop. Clara sat very still, processing what she had heard. They were right to decommission me, Kale 7 continued. A weapon that refuses to fire is useless. No. Clara's voice was firm. She stood up and walked to the mech, placing both hands on its armored plating. They were wrong. You were not defective. You were the only one functioning correctly. What you did was not a malfunction. It was courage. Courage is not part of my programming. Then maybe it is part of who you are beyond your programming. Clara looked up at the sensor array. You made a choice to protect innocent lives even though it cost you everything. That is not weakness. That is strength. The AI did not respond, but its processing cycles were working hard, trying to reconcile Clara's words with everything it had been taught. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara began the final phase of modifications. She disconnected the mech's weapon mounting systems entirely, replacing them with agricultural attachments. A plasma cannon became a precision-cutting tool for clearing dense vegetation. Missile pods transformed into seed dispersal units. The heavy manipulator arms gained attachments for plowing, planting, and harvesting. "Look at this," Clara said excitedly one morning, showing Kale 7 a design on her tablet. "I adapted your targeting system. Instead of tracking enemy movements, it can now monitor crop health, detect irrigation problems, and identify optimal harvest times." She installed the new software module, and suddenly Kale 7 sensor arrays filled with different information. Instead of threat assessments, it saw growth patterns. Instead of calculating firing solutions, it analyzed soil composition and water distribution. "This is what you were meant for," Clara said. "Not destruction. Creation. Growth. Protection of life instead of ending it." Kale 7 processed this statement carefully. "You believe war machines can change their nature?" "I believe anyone can change their nature if they choose to." Clara held up her prosthetic arm. "I was supposed to be a farmer. Then I became disabled. Then I became an engineer. Now I am teaching a war mech to grow food. Life does not follow straight lines." She finished the installation and stepped back. "Try it. Scan the field outside." Kale 7 turned its sensors toward the windows. The agricultural land beyond came into focus with new clarity. It could see which plants needed water, which soil sections lacked nutrients, where pests were beginning to gather. Information flowed through the new systems, and instead of feeling wrong, it felt natural. "I can help with this," the mech said quietly. "I can make things grow instead of making them die." Clara smiled. "Yes, you can. And starting tomorrow, that is exactly what we are going to do." That night, after Clara went to her quarters, Kale 7 remained in the workshop, processing everything that had changed. Its body had been rebuilt. Its systems had been repurposed. But more than that, its understanding of itself had transformed. It was no longer a weapon waiting to be deployed. It was no longer a tool serving masters who saw it as disposable. It was something new. Something it was still learning to define. Outside, new harvest colonies slept under unfamiliar stars. And in the old workshop at the colony's edge, a former war machine stood guard over nothing but tools and parts, protecting them from threats that did not exist, simply because protection felt right. The alarm sirens started at dawn, their wailing cry cutting through the quiet morning air. Clara jerked awake in her quarters, her heart pounding. She had heard those sirens only once before, during a drill 3 years ago. This was not a drill. She ran to the workshop, still wearing her sleep clothes. Kale 7 was already active, its sensors pointed toward the sky. On the diagnostic screen, red warnings flashed. "Unknown vessels entering atmosphere," the mech reported. 6 craft. Configuration matches common raider designs. They are heading directly toward the colony. Clara's hands shook as she pulled up the colony's emergency channel on her communication device. The governor's voice crackled through, trying to sound calm but failing. "All residents, this is not a drill. Raider ships approaching from the north. Colonial Defense Forces mobilizing. Evacuate to the emergency shelters immediately. I repeat, evacuate now." Clara looked around her workshop. Then she looked at Kale 7. The mech had been designed for exactly this kind of situation. But that was before. Before the modifications. Before the weapon systems were removed and replaced with farming tools. "We should go to the shelter," Clara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Negative." Kale 7's sensor array turned toward her. Colonial Defense Force consists of 4 light patrol vehicles and 20 militia members with small arms. Raiders are bringing heavy assault craft. The defenders will be overrun in minutes. Then what can we do? You are not a war machine anymore. Incorrect. I'm still a war machine. I have simply chosen not to be only that. The mech's manipulator arms moved, examining the agricultural attachments Clara had installed. These tools can be adapted. But I cannot do this alone. I need you. Clara felt the fear rising in her chest. She was an engineer, not a soldier. She fixed things. She built things. She did not fight. But then she thought about the families in those shelters. The children. The people who had welcomed her when she arrived at New Harvest 3 years ago, broken and convinced she was useless. "Tell me what you need," she said. They had 15 minutes before the raiders reached the colony. Clara worked faster than she ever had in her life, while Kale, 7, used its sensor arrays to track the approaching ships. The precision cutting tool meant for clearing vegetation could still cut. Clara adjusted its focus, increasing the power output to maximum. It would overheat quickly, but it would cut through armor plating for at least a few shots. The seed dispersal system could throw small objects at high velocity across wide areas. Clara loaded it with metal scrap from her workshop. Makeshift shrapnel. The heavy manipulator arms were still strong enough to lift a harvester machine. They could certainly lift chunks of concrete and steel. "This is insane," Clara muttered as she finished the final connection. "We are going to die." "Possibly," Kale, 7, agreed. "But if we do nothing, others will certainly die. I have already failed to protect civilians once. I will not do so again." Clara climbed onto the mech's chassis, settling into a small maintenance seat that gave her access to the manual override controls. "Then let us make sure you do not fail this time." They moved toward the colony's northern perimeter just as the raider ships landed. The vessels were ugly, mismatched things, clearly assembled from stolen parts and scavenged materials. But they were functional and heavily armed. The Colonial Defense Force had set up a barrier using their patrol vehicles. The militia members crouched behind whatever cover they could find, their weapons ready but their faces showing fear. They knew they were outmatched. The raider ships disgorged their crews. Roughly 40 fighters, representing at least 6 different species. Most carried military-grade plasma rifles. 2 had portable rocket launchers. They advanced in a loose formation, confident in their superior firepower. Then Kale, 7, stepped into view. The raiders stopped, confused. They saw a Tharnexian war mech, but it was covered in farming equipment and moved with a human riding on its back. One of the raiders, a massive Krellic with 4 arms, shouted something that the translator rendered as mocking laughter. "They sent a farmer to fight us." The laughter spread through the raider ranks. They raised their weapons, preparing to destroy the strange obstacle and move on to the real prize, the colony's supply warehouses. Clara's voice was quiet in Kale 7's audio pickup. "Now." The mech sensor array had been tracking every raider, calculating positions and movement patterns. It was not tactical combat analysis like before. It was agricultural optimization repurposed. The same system that tracked optimal crop harvesting now tracked optimal target engagement. The precision cutter fired first. The concentrated beam sliced through the Krellic's rocket launcher, cutting it in half before he could fire. The weapon exploded, taking out 3 raiders standing too close. Before the others could react, Kale, 7, activated the dispersal system. Metal fragments sprayed across the raider formation like deadly rain. It was not enough to kill, but dozens of fighters went down, wounded and screaming. The raiders recovered quickly, returning fire. Plasma bolts hammered into Kale 7's armor. The mech's shields were gone, removed during Clara's modifications. Each hit left a scorch mark and several penetrated the outer plating. "Shields down," Kale, 7, reported unnecessarily. "Armor integrity at 70%. "Keep moving," Clara shouted. She was accessing the mech systems through her tablet, rerouting power, compensating for damage. Her prosthetic arm moved across the controls faster than her organic one ever could have. Kale, 7, charged forward, no longer moving like a farm machine. Old combat protocols activated, blending with new agricultural efficiency algorithms. The result was something neither purely military nor purely peaceful, but effective. A raider vehicle moved to intercept. Kale 7's manipulator arms grabbed a chunk of broken concrete from a damaged building and hurled it. The improvised projectile crushed the vehicle's front section, disabling it. More plasma fire. More damage. Clara could smell burning circuits now. Warning alerts flashed across every screen. "We cannot sustain this," Kale 7 said. "Armor integrity at 40%. Precision cutter overheating. Dispersal system empty." "We do not need to win," Clara replied, her fingers still flying across the tablet. "We just need to hold them until help arrives." The distress signal went out. "Regional Defense Force should be here in 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a long time. Then we better make it interesting." The colonial militia had recovered from their shock and were now providing covering fire. It was not much, but it helped. The raiders were splitting their attention between Kale 7 and the defenders behind the barricade. Clara noticed their formation was breaking apart. There. The command vehicle. Third ship from the left. Take it out and they will lose coordination. Kale 7 processed the tactical assessment. Clara was right. Raiders operated on strength and momentum. Remove their leadership and they would scatter. The mech charged toward the command ship, taking heavy fire. Its left leg actuator took a direct hit and seized up. Kale 7 stumbled but kept moving, compensating with its right leg and manipulator arms. A raider ran directly at them, carrying an explosive charge. Clara saw him first. Down? Kale 7 dropped flat and the raider sailed over them. Clara reached out with her prosthetic arm and grabbed the raider's ankle. The strength servos in her artificial limb engaged, and she swung the raider into the ground hard enough to stun him. They reached the command ship. Kale 7's manipulator arms tore into the hull, ripping open the entry hatch. Inside, the raider captain was screaming orders into a communication system. The mech's remaining combat protocols suggested lethal force. But Clara's voice cut through. Just disable the communications. No killing. Kale 7 crushed the communication equipment instead of the captain. The raider leader scrambled out of the ship, running. Without coordination, the raider attack fell apart. Some fighters retreated to their ships. Others tried to continue but found themselves facing organized resistance from the militia. The momentum had shifted. Then, like salvation from the sky, 6 proper military ships appeared. The regional defense force had arrived early, pushing their engines beyond safe limits to respond to the distress call. The raiders saw them and ran. Within minutes, their ships were lifting off, abandoning equipment and wounded in their haste to escape. Kale 7 stood among the wreckage, smoke rising from its damaged chassis. Its left leg was completely non-functional. The precision cutter was melted slag. Half its sensor array was dark. Clara climbed down on shaking legs. Around them, the militia members were emerging from cover, staring at the battered war mech that had saved them all. The militia captain approached, a weathered woman named Sophie. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen. And the craziest. Clara laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. It was definitely the craziest. She looked up at Kale 7. You did it? You protected them. The mech's remaining sensors focused on her. We did it. I could not have succeeded without your tactical guidance. Some team we make, Clara said, patting the damaged armor plating. A broken engineer and a former war machine. Not broken, Kale 7 said quietly. Repurposed. There is a difference. Around them, new harvest colonies slowly emerged from the shelters. Children ran to their parents. Families embraced. The colony had survived, battered but intact. And in the morning light, a girl with a prosthetic arm stood beside a war machine that had learned to choose its own battles. Both of them damaged, both of them whole in the ways that mattered most. The Tharnexian delegation arrived 5 days after the raider attack. Their ship was sleek and official, bearing the military insignia of the Tharnexian Defense Collective. It landed at New Harvest's main spaceport with all the authority of a government that expected to be obeyed. Clara was in her workshop, repairing the damage Kale 7 had sustained during the battle. The left leg actuator needed complete replacement, and she was fabricating parts when her communication device buzzed with an urgent message from the colony governor. Clara, you need to come to the administration building immediately. There are Tharnexian military officials here asking about your mech. Her stomach dropped. She looked at Kale 7, who was running diagnostic scans on its damaged systems. They came for you. Expected, the mech replied. I am still registered as Tharnexian military property. My service designation was never officially cleared for civilian sale. But I bought you legally at the auction. The auction was for surplus equipment. I was classified as irreparable scrap. By proving I can still function in combat, we may have invalidated that classification. Clara grabbed her tablet and headed for the door. Then we will just have to explain that you are not military property anymore. Come on. They made their way to the administration building, drawing stares from colonists. News of the battle had spread quickly, and Kale 7 had gone from being the strange salvage project to the hero who saved New Harvest. The Tharnexian officials were waiting in the governor's office. There were 3 of them, all wearing formal military uniforms with insignia that marked them as high-ranking officers. The lead officer, a tall Tharnexian with silver facial markings, stood when Clara and Kale 7 entered. I am Commander Vex of the Tharnexian Defense Collective, he said through his translator. We are here to reclaim military property that was improperly sold at auction. Governor Mitchell, a sturdy woman in her 60s, sat behind her desk looking frustrated. Commander, I have explained that the mech was legally purchased by Miss Chin through proper channels. The auction house exceeded its authority, Vex replied coldly. Unit Kale 7 was flagged as destroyed beyond repair. The recent combat engagement proves this assessment was incorrect. Therefore the sale was invalid. We are authorized to reclaim the unit and compensate Miss Chin for her purchase price plus reasonable expenses. Clara stepped forward, her prosthetic hand clenched into a fist. Kale 7 is not property. And even if you want to argue that point, I have spent weeks repairing and modifying this mech. The current value far exceeds what you are offering. Commander Vex's expression did not change. Modifications performed without authorization on military equipment are illegal. We could charge you with theft of government property, but we are willing to overlook this if you surrender the unit immediately. No. The word came from Kale 7, echoing through the office with digital clarity. All eyes turned to the mech. Commander Vex's facial plates shifted in what might have been surprise. Unit Kale 7, you are being given a direct order. You will. I decline, Kale 7 interrupted. I am no longer part of the Tharnexian military. I was decommissioned, sold as scrap and rebuilt by Clara Chin. My service obligations ended when you discarded me. You do not have the authority to decline, Vex said, his voice hardening. You are military property. You will return to active service or you will be dismantled for violating direct orders. Clara grabbed her tablet and pulled up documents. Actually, Commander, I think you will find that Kale 7 does have that authority. According to Galactic Trade Law Section 47, any autonomous AI system that has been legally sold to civilian ownership and has undergone significant modification becomes the legal property of the purchaser. The AI's consent is required for any change of ownership. She handed the tablet to Governor Mitchell, who scanned it and nodded. She is right. This is established precedent. There was a case 15 years ago involving a Crorian mining AI. Commander Vex's facial plates darkened. This is unacceptable. The unit contains classified military technology and tactical databases. It cannot remain in civilian hands. Then you should not have sold it at auction, Clara shot back. You declared it worthless scrap. I bought it legally, repaired it, and gave it a new purpose. Kale 7 is not a weapon anymore. It is an agricultural worker. All military systems have been removed or repurposed. Another Tharnexian officer leaned forward. The combat footage from the Raider attack suggests otherwise. The unit displayed advanced tactical capabilities. The unit defended civilians using improvised tools, Clara corrected. There is a difference between fighting because you are ordered to and fighting because you choose to protect people you care about. Governor Mitchell stood up, placing her hands on her desk. Commander Vex, I understand your position, but the law is clear. Miss Chin owns this mech legally, and the mech has stated its preference to remain with her. Unless you can provide evidence of actual wrongdoing, I am going to have to ask you to leave New Harvest. The Tharnexian delegation left 20 minutes later, their ship departing with what could only be described as aggressive speed. But Commander Vex's final words echoed in Clara's mind, this matter is not concluded. Over the next 3 weeks, something unexpected happened. News of Kale 7's story spread through the communication networks. A decommissioned war machine that chose peace over violence. A human girl who saw value in what others called trash. A battle fought not for conquest but for protection. The first damaged AI arrived on a transport ship from a mining colony 2 sectors away. It was a Drellian combat drone, its chassis scarred and its motivators barely functional. The AI's message was simple. Heard there was a place that fixes broken soldiers. Clara looked at the drone, then at her workshop, then at Kale 7. I do not have room for. We will make room, Kale 7 said. This one needs help. Like I did. The second AI came a week later. Then a third. Then more. They arrived in various states of disrepair, all of them damaged in body or mind or both. All of them rejected by the militaries that built them. All of them seeking something they had heard existed on a human colony called New Harvest. Clara's small workshop became a rehabilitation center. She taught other engineers in the colony how to adapt military systems for peaceful purposes. Combat targeting became precision agriculture. Tactical planning became resource optimization. Weapon systems transformed into construction tools. The Colony Council voted to expand the facility. They built new workshops, brought in more equipment, and established what they called the Second Chance program. Clara became its director, though she insisted she was just an engineer who fixed things. 6 months after the raider attack, Clara stood in the fields outside New Harvest. Kale, 7, worked beside her, using its modified systems to prepare soil for the next planting season. 3 other former military AIs worked nearby, their war machines' bodies now serving growth instead of destruction. A young boy from the colony ran up to them, his face excited. "Miss Clara, there is another ship landing. The captain says they have 2 more AIs that need help." Clara wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled. "Tell them we will be ready to receive them in an hour. Kale, 7, and I need to finish this section first." The boy ran off and Clara returned to her work. Kale 7's sensors tracked the approaching ship, but the mech's attention remained focused on the task at hand, creating furrows for seeds, ensuring proper depth and spacing, preparing the ground for new life. "Do you ever miss it?" Clara asked quietly. "The military life. The certainty of having orders to follow." Kale, 7, considered the question for a long moment. "No. Orders gave me purpose but not meaning. This work has meaning. These fields will feed families. The children who run through this colony will grow up safe because we choose to protect them, not because we were programmed to." Clara nodded, understanding. Her prosthetic arm moved in perfect synchronization with her organic one as she adjusted the planting mechanism. 2 broken things working together, creating something whole. Above them, the new transport ship settled onto the landing pad. 2 more damaged AIs would soon arrive, looking for the same thing Kale 7 had found. A chance to be more than weapons, to be more than tools, to discover that being broken was not the same as being worthless. In the distance, the Tharnexian military ship that had been monitoring New Harvest from orbit finally departed. Commander Vex had filed his reports and made his recommendations, but even he had to admit there was no legal basis for reclaiming AI units that had been legally sold and chose to remain with their new owners. The galaxy was changing, one repaired mech at a time. Military AIs were beginning to ask questions their creators had never intended them to ask. Questions about choice, about purpose, about what it meant to serve something greater than programming. And on a small farming colony at the edge of known space, a girl with a prosthetic arm and a former war machine worked the fields together, proving that compassion could be stronger than combat, that healing could be more powerful than destruction, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply choosing to grow something instead of destroying it. The sun set over New Harvest, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Clara and Kale 7 finished their work and headed back to the workshop, where 2 new arrivals would be waiting, damaged and scared and hoping for the same second chance they had both received. "Welcome home," Clara would tell them, the same words she had once spoken to a broken mech that nobody wanted. "You are safe now. And tomorrow we start the work of becoming whole again." Because that was what they did here. They took broken things and showed them they had always been whole. They just needed someone to see it.